Okay, can we start with carbon offset? Is not a term that you hear so much of at the moment. Net zero's under fire, and there's some politician somewhere in the world telling us all to drill, baby, drill. It doesn't seem as cool anymore. Like whenever you flew, there was always offset your air miles with planting a tree. I think even beer companies, was it BrewDog? I think
Yes.
BrewDog were like planting a tree for every beer you poured a few years ago.
Yeah.
It was everywhere, but it doesn't seem to be quite so in your face at the moment. So why is it still important? Why is it important? What does it mean to you?
I think that's a question for everybody to answer for themselves, whether it's personal or in business. In this context, when we're talking about our company, Fynlo AI, we're talking about road freight, and targeting at the moment on the UK road freight sector, but we're certainly starting to touch on Europe and the US as well. Not necessarily aiming to take the internal combustion engines off the road at all, but actually saying, while we need to still use these internal combustion engines, we can use them better.
What is your journey? How,
Yeah.
how did Finlo start? Why?
Question.
Why? That's the
Yeah,
question.
good. I like it. Is it a personal crusade? No, not at all. I don't have, personal or professional net zero targets or something like that. Where did Finlo start? Well, my business partner and I, Matt, the co-founder of Fynlo AI, he actually started and founded the company before I joined, and he comes from the freight industry. And Matt's perspective on starting up Fynlo AI was about recognizing a gap in the market for some technology, a SaaS, software as a service, that can speed up a really arduous, difficult task that is on the to-do list for a lot of fleet managers and others in similar jobs. Any company, not necessarily freight actually, but any company that has a fleet of vehicles is finding it pretty tricky to report accurately on their emissions for their vehicles. If as a company you have a target of net zero by 2033 or 2035 or something, if as a company you have a target like that, your fleet of vehicles will be contributing towards it greatly. In most cases, that would be somebody's scope 1 emissions, the direct emissions from a asset that the company is using. So yeah, Matt works in the freight industry. Most of his career, he's been in the freight forwarding side of the business, and these days there's a growing emphasis on those companies to be able to report on their emissions and submit them actually to HMRC once a year with the company reports. And in the recent year, we've seen a growing importance on the accuracy of it. How do you measure those accurately? It is a real challenge, actually. So we set about the task. I come from the motor industry, and so I understand engines, fuel burning, tailpipe emissions, and also understand a little bit about the person behind the wheel and how they can have a big effect on them, and the sort of factors that will directly affect the calculation and the output of fuel efficiency, as well as the emissions from the tailpipes. We sort of combined Matt's industry expertise with my vehicle expertise, and we're coming up with this tool, this software as a service called Fynlo AI, that can really help those people measure accurately what's coming out the tailpipe.
Yeah, it feels like accuracy is kind of a really interesting, really difficult challenge to solve. So I think what you're saying is that organisations with fleets of a certain size, I guess, or maybe organisations of a certain size, have to submit their data.
Yes, we've been really driving the word accuracy. We've been talking with quite a lot of big companies as well about the difference between just taking a basic OEM brochure CO2e figure and saying, okay, that's my output per kilometer, regardless of payload, regardless of driver behavior. Just taking that and timesing it by the kilometers or miles you're driving. Hey, presto, that's the footprint from a truck today. And it's not. It just isn't. And so we've been demonstrating that and trying to get that message across quite clearly. And it seems to have worked. But I know that's not only coming from us. There's a not-for-profit organization or regulator called the Smart Freight Center, and they've got a department called GLEC, Global Logistics Emissions Council. There we go. But they're a not-for-profit regulator, and they contribute quite a lot to the industry, and a lot of people turn to them. And I know that they are talking a lot about accuracy as well these days. We've been talking to GLEC a lot about accuracy since we've been connected with them. So I think amongst the circle, the emphasis on it on accuracy is just grown, and we've contributed to that, no doubt.
I guess organizations of a certain size, or if you've got fleets of a certain size, getting specific with those numbers must be quite tricky. And people are just kind of, are they guessing and saying, well, we've got this number of trucks and we do this kind of number of miles, therefore it must be this. How does that kind of accuracy layer work? And does it really matter?
Yeah, absolutely right, Rob. I think the first question I'll answer is how are people doing it at the moment? And Matt and I have had a lot of discussions with a lot of fleet managers, varying size, various types of vehicles within their fleets as well. The first point I think to remember is that they are trying to be as accurate as possible. They would like to understand what are our carbon emissions for our fleet, and then use that information not only because they need to report it on their annual HMRC reports, but also use that information just to make some decisions about the fleet. Have we got one vehicle that's a particularly bad emitter? Maybe we ought to think about replacing that vehicle, or maybe there's a fault that could be rectified that would clean it up. Have we got a driver? Because we all know that driving style has a big impact on the real emissions out of the tailpipe. And have we got a driver that maybe if we change some habits or change some routes, we might be able to clean up that vehicle as well. So I think the general consensus is that fleet managers and companies with a fleet, they like the idea of being accurate, and it's hard to know that they're being accurate. That it's hard to verify that the calculation result that they reach is spot on. And so therefore, are the actions I'm going to take really having a positive impact on our fleet's carbon emissions? The basis for a lot of calculations out there is taking the manufacturer of the vehicle, who gives you a CO2e typically in grams per kilometers or kilograms per kilometers. When you look in the brochure of the vehicle and you see that a Ford Transit with a 2-litre diesel engine has CO2 emissions of about 150 grams per kilometer as an average. And we know that that is a more of a clinical test at the time of vehicle testing rather than out on the road. It's pretty accurate. You could achieve that, but in general, daily driving habits of the driver and routes will affect that as a real output. And then also the payload on the vehicle will affect that as a real output, as well as then the condition of the vehicle as well. Tire pressures, for example, has a big impact on generally the energy efficiency of a vehicle and therefore what comes out the tailpipe. So once on the road, in the hands of human beings, the CO2e emissions out of the tailpipe will vary greatly. The real carbon emissions of the fleet could be a lot larger, or it could be a lot smaller, actually. Really just depends on what's happening out there on the road, the way they manage their fleet, their routes, and then the driver's styles. And payload, the weight of the vehicle, if that is fluctuating, especially delivery vehicles, that's going to fluctuate a lot, especially freight vehicles that are moving great quantities of goods from one location to another, and maybe with multiple stop-offs, emptying along the way and driving back empty. And that's going to have hugely varying emissions outputs as it completes the journey. So why be more accurate than just calculating the basic data and timesing it by your distance? Well, if you want to offset, if you have a carbon neutral target or a net zero target, then really, if you want to reach that target, you need to be accurate. You need to know where you stand now so you can say, right, what do we need to clean up? How much do we need to clean up? And if we're going to invest in some offsets because we can't reduce down to zero enough yet, and in terms of a fleet, that might mean switching over to electric vehicles and then having our own charger that's completely powered by solar or something. This idea is great, but very difficult to achieve in reality. Then it means that there is some emissions all the way that need to be cleaned up. And it's a good idea to be accurate, I think, so that you can definitely know that you're reaching net zero.
Yeah. So it's part compliance, but also part conscience. People want to get this right.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
So it's okay. Interesting. I mean, so it sounds like you've been on the standard classic almost entrepreneurial journey, right? So you've got your niche industry knowledge that yourself and Matt know inside out. You've seen a problem. You think you've got something to contribute to that particular problem domain. But how do you get from there to actually spinning up a product and actually trying to solve that problem? How do you make that leap from it'd be great to solve this to, oh, we're actually doing it now?
Yeah, that's a good point. Matt and I, the first thing that we do is recognize our strengths and also our shortcomings. And one of our shortcomings is software development for sure. Neither Matt or I are technical in that sense. And so the first thing to do is to identify we need to know that this is a problem that's worth solving. And we know that it is from market feedback as well as our own research. And then we need to know how might we solve it? Well, we need to get out there and again, through market research and getting that pipeline of customers really full with a variety of customers. You have small fleets, big fleets, and different types of vehicles and different types of haulage or traveling going on. And you can say, what do they need? In order to make this possible for them, what do they need? And a dashboard is an ideal solution, a quick look dashboard that performs the calculation for them. They're already often using dashboards with typical vehicle telematics. They're using a dashboard that shows them where is my vehicle, what is the mileage, some basic statuses, how long has the driver been driving for. And the one thing these dashboards don't show them is anything linked to the carbon emissions. And so that's where we come in. If we can either integrate with an existing dashboard or offer them a side-by-side dashboard that can complement it, this would mean that they can have a quick look at any time they like with a live update, which will enable them to know what's happening. So yeah, we got to, right at the beginning, you got to identify the customer, who needs it, why do they need it, long, lengthy discussions and promotions, and build the need, build the understanding of the problem and build the need. As we all know that in years to come, the need for solutions like this are only going to grow. And once you're there and you identify how that customer would best absorb this information, use this information, download a report or somehow connect it with another system like the telematics. Once you understand that, we can then build it because we know what it's going to look like. And in this case, this is where Kevin and your colleagues came in. As we looked at a few different developers, Dutrix stood out as a developer that would get us off the ground, get us started. Dutrix have a great deal of experience in software as a service in a variety of different applications. So yeah, I would say ultimately know your strengths, know your limitations, bring in an expert who can fill those gaps with their strengths. That's where they come in and support you where you've got limitations.
Yeah, so you mentioned there the challenges of getting started. There's one thing having a great idea. There's one thing spotting a problem. There's one thing understanding the market, but getting started is often a huge challenge,
Yes.
and it's a different skill set to kind of start something than it is to kind of maintain something and operate something.
Yeah.
You mentioned pace. Pace was potentially a challenge there. So I would assume, cost is an issue as well. How do you fund this
He's
thing?
gone there. He's
All you've
gone
got is a
there.
pipe dream at the moment. How do you fund it? How do you kind of deal with some of those challenges, time, cash, and getting the right people involved to move that forward?
Honestly, Rob, Kev, uh, funding is a major part of any startup. If you've got deep pockets of your own, and I mean very deep, and you can fund your own runway for 12, 18 months, when it comes to software development, customer pipeline development, all the various subscriptions and softwares that you need for yourself, like a CRM and a bookkeeping software and an accountant and so on. So many costs, where there is no income coming in to fund those costs. Yeah, it's really difficult. And for Matt and I, we both have families. We both have typical household expenses that we need to keep up with, and there really is no opportunity for personal income during those first 12 months to 18 months, maybe in this case. And you are looking at every penny that comes into the business. You're not going to be able to use that for your own life. So you need to be somehow prepared for that. There needs to either be a side-by-side income, something somewhere else that you're able to draw income from, continue working and put enough hours into your startup to build it, or unless you have very deep pockets already. In the case of Matt and I, it was absolute tireless lobbying and applying and researching and pitching to various investors. And there is a lot of no's. There's a bit of a Disney phrase, you kiss a lot of frogs before you get a prince. And it really is like that. It really is like that. And you do get for months, the sour taste in your mouth, if we want to carry on with the frog kissing idea. But you get that for months. And then suddenly someone says, we like that. We see you. We understand that picture, and we see where it could be in 18 months, and we'll give you a chance. And at this stage, or if I jump back 6 months, we hadn't met Kevin at Dutrix and the team there who were developing the software. We didn't have pictures other than a sketch in a notebook of what it might look like on someone's screen. We had a pitch deck. We had a well thought out business plan of where we could be going with this, and really was us being absolutely, and we still are, we never let go of this. In your own personality, in your own character, you've got to be absolutely determined and absolutely optimistic. You've got to be convinced in yourself. Otherwise you'll just let it go. You'll just give up. And because it takes a very long time to get to a point where there's customer revenue coming in. It feels like a long time. Anyway, it feels like a long time.
It's a pretty typical startup journey, isn't it? And every business has been a startup at one point or another.
Yes.
And it is really hard getting that initial traction, getting those ideas off the ground, building the team and the people around you that are going to help you to succeed. Yeah, and I think as kind of Dutrix, we've worked with a lot of startups over the years, and we're always trying to think about the challenges that they're facing, like the challenges that we faced once upon a time, and how can you work with them within the limitations that they're existing within to bring something to market and connect with their audience as quickly as possible. I think that's kind of where we met you guys, wasn't
Yes.
it? I think you just landed in Bethnal Green Ventures, and it was a mutual acquaintance, I think, that put us in touch.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, the timing was excellent. There was a little bit of a sort of the wind blew in our favor somehow. I don't know, the universe turned some wheels and we came across each other basically. And it was ideal. We talked to a few different developers, just like we talked to so many different potential investors. And then Bethnal Green Ventures, you're right, it's a good time to bring them up. Bethnal Green Ventures were the investor who said, we like the look of this, we like you, we like your proposal, and we're willing to back you with an initial investment. And this is a big risk for them. This is a big risk because we are at a stage, back in March 2025, we're at a stage where we don't have a product, we don't have actual customers, we just have a well thought out idea. That's all we have. And we actually don't know how we're going to build it and bring it to life yet. And very soon after that, we were able to, once we had that investment, we were able to start talking more seriously with developers, and developers are then, able to understand better where we're going with it.
It was kind of fortunate for us as well, because it happened at a very interesting time in the industry where the speed at which you could start to build out some prototypes and crank through requirements and use AI tooling was all sort of very new. And you were our guinea pigs, actually, weren't you?
Yes.
And we were very upfront about that. So we think we've got a new way of approaching this. If you're up for it, Fynlo, then this is what we want to do. Just to put some context around that, we always used to do something called the Google Design Sprint, which was pioneered by Google, and it was a 5-day back-to-back kind of set of workshops and product development, which basically took people's ideas. It was a very intensive kind of workshop-led sessions, and through those workshops and extracting those ideas and scamping out early prototypes on paper and then moving them through to a design phase and then finishing up with kind of some prototyping and user testing, you would explore and validate your product at an early stage to get to something you had confidence in and you wanted to take forward. And we were looking at doing something based on that, but slightly different. We actually wanted to, in the same period of time, we wanted to get to a fully working piece of software through bringing AI tooling into all of those workshop sessions. So we could very quickly extract requirements, very quickly prototype softwares and architectures, very quickly go from design to code. And yeah, and that's something we ran for the first time with you guys. And it'd just be interesting really to get your kind of take on that, how that experience was, what the process was, how you found it, because I suppose we were both going into this essentially for the first time.
Yeah, it was a really interesting process. I found it hugely beneficial. To cut to the outcome first, I found it hugely beneficial to be in the room with experts from your side of the industry, working behind how the software works, and to understand a little bit better what is it you actually need to know from us. I went into that room not knowing if what I had to say and what I had to show and what I could describe of our ideas, if that would even translate in your world to something you can build, So yeah, because it was a totally a first time experience for me. Yet I think I was really impressed with what you guys could do in a short space of time with this technique, Kevin, you and the team. When you when 3 or 4 of you are coming at it from different angles, you've got architects, designers, and developers. You've got at least one of each in that room at the same time, and they're able to say, right, okay, well, if you want it to look like this, a designer runs away with that because you're talking about how it looks, and the designer says, I know how to make it look, but then the developer or the architect says, well, how are we going to make that pop up like that if we've only got this input and this input? It's not going to show up that way, Owen. So we need another input, or we need a different input, and where do we get that input from? So the questions that came back were really interesting, and what it helped us do was to then further strengthen our discussions with potential customers, because our number one question from every customer we've spoken to has been how do you get a more accurate calculation and bring it up on my dashboard so quickly? How do you do that? And I went into that think tank with the same question, actually. This is what we're promising to our customers. And I believe, with optimism and determination, I believe that we're going to be able to get a more accurate calculation quickly onto their screens. And I'm pretty sure I understand it, from my auto industry experience, especially with a lot of the newer modern brands. You've got apps as a customer, as a driver of a car. You've got an app, and you've got your car is a device on your network just as much as your phone is a device on your network, and they're able to communicate with each other independently and so on. And I'm thinking, right, well, trucks have got, a lot of the time, they've got devices in them that communicate back to HQ with where they are, how they're driving, and so on. Well, if we can get the right information out of that link, then they can use our calculation that we've developed, using that data as some of the inputs to that calculation, and then we can bring out an answer to that question or that equation that says, here's the real CO2e output of this vehicle. But it wasn't, as we went in, there was a lot of, Matt and I, there was bright ideas and intentions, but then as we came out of it, it was, right, now we also know how. And that's the most common question from our customers. The sprint that we went into with those really wide open discussions enabled us to then go back to customers and say, yeah, as that data comes in from this resource and we do this, our system is going to now work it out for you in this way and bring up your results on the screen.
Yeah.
But it was a day, Kevin. There was
a
day.
Yeah, a day, and there were 4 workshops, very intense day, wasn't it?
Yes.
4 or 5 workshops back to back, and a huge amount of ground that was covered.
Yeah.
And yeah, that design session was one of those workshops.
And we were in one day, and it really was about 8 hours of thinking in a room with no windows. I mean,
yeah.
It was a tank, right? It was a tank with one.
Windows are available,
yeah,
for anyone that's listening.
Yeah. If Matt and I had upped to the budget, we could have had a room with windows and everything. Yeah. But we, at the end of the day, we not only had an understanding of how the inputs, the data inputs, were going to do something in the back and work with our calculations and then come out with a visual. We had concepts for the different pages, the click-ons, as you dig deeper into that data, how many of those click-ons there needed to be, and then the little avatar that would go with it. I mean, Fynlo is the name of the person that is giving you your AI support. Fynlo is the one that you would ask, just like Siri or Alexa. You know, you're going to ask Fynlo for a bit of deep dive into your data. And really, yeah, in a day we had so much.
Yeah, that's actually something that we would have always done, is get people to think through that kind of design, look to what works for them and what they've seen working elsewhere, and get to a point where we have an understanding of what that app looks like. We did that at a supercharged pace, but the more interesting thing for me, because as I said, it was the first time for both of us, is the amount of output we got on that first day it blew me away, honestly. So we've done work with vehicle tracking companies in the past and with net zero in the past. And so we have a bunch of domain knowledge. And one of the things that you said was important was we want this to integrate with fleet tracking software. We see it as a kind of bolt-on potentially for fleet tracking software.
Right.
And so what we were able to do was go, well, hang on, we understand quite a lot about fleet tracking software. So we know what those databases look like. We know the kind of data that you get from those things. And we were able to use our AI tooling to essentially architect an entire data schema. This is a bit technical now, sorry for those listening, but an entire data schema, an entire API, and scaffold that whole thing to kind of test if the data we were going to get back was the right kind of stuff to fit into the carbon emissions calculations, and what was missing, and do that kind of gap analysis. And just to come out of that one day, not only with a bunch of screens and designs, having listened to the business proposition and really kind of dissected that and challenged that and mapped that out into a bunch of user stories and feature requirements and all that kind of stuff, but to come out of it with actual technical scaffolding as well, architecture diagrams and calculations and early versions of APIs and databases, in what that end-to-end 8-hour session was just incredible. And obviously that allowed us then to go off and build that into something quite compelling.
Yeah, it was. If we then jump to the finish line of that sprint, you called it a 5-day sprint. And so far we're talking about that one day in the tank, right? And for Matt and I, that was the work that we saw, like literally saw as we were in it and involved in it. So that was the work that we saw. But what I do know as a result, you guys took that away, and there was 3 or 4 of you working on that software to actually make a working prototype. A prototype SaaS in about 5 days is pretty, I mean, it's your world, but I believe that's really good going. And what it enabled us to do was have a working prototype that you can then take to customers and develop that proof of concept. You can show visuals, you can demonstrate examples and talk a potential customer through it. And they're able to say, yeah, I get it. I like it. And our next step, and that's actually where we are right now, is to then connect live API data. You've got a prototype for it, and then you have the API connection to have live data streaming through it from vehicles rolling on the road is the next step after it. But I just think within, one day we achieved a lot, but I think it should be acknowledged that when you think about all the work that has to follow up from that, to have a working prototype in your hands within 5 days of work. I mean, have you ever done that before?
It was a first for us.
Yeah.
And I remember actually being in that room and you came to the table with all these ideas, and as you normally have to do with startups, it's yes, but we need to kind of reduce the scope slightly. So there were 2 or 3 features that we said, you know what, we're going to park these, and for the purposes of this 5-day sprint, we're going to focus on the other stuff. But actually, some of these features were quite big. So one of the features was obviously the Fynlo AI itself, right? The Fynlo guy that you could talk to, and that was going to interrogate your data, and we actually found that within the time that we had, we were able to build that whole thing as well. And we were able to put, full authentication and user permissions in and that kind of thing, which again we hadn't really thought that was possible. And a number of firsts. So going from the design that we did live with you on that first day, and getting it into code that the developers could carry on building off of on the second day, that just happened like that.
Yeah.
And of course, people are getting used to this now. But when we did this, it was brand new, and we were doing it for the first time. So just the gains that we experienced were phenomenal. What would have taken 2-3 months, we managed to deliver in 5 days.
I think the way you describe it there, Kevin, is really telling of how quickly your industry moves on, especially because if only 6 months ago it was brand new, and now, so that was back in, March, we started really talking about what we were going to do, March, April time. And I think, were we in the think tank in end of April, was it? I can't remember the day exactly, but it was springtime, wasn't it? And here we are, not 6 months later, you're saying people are getting used to it.
6 months has become an age in our industry now.
Yeah.
It's something else at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, so we first started looking at some of this stuff, November, December, January last year, and we were wondering what was possible. What is possible with an AI enabled team, and obviously the work with you guys genuinely surprised us.
Right.
That quite so much was possible if you give the people the right, you give great people the right tooling. It's incredible new technology. You can achieve some quite astonishing things, and obviously now we're rolling that through the rest of our teams.
The other thing that really stood out for me was, again, it's one of these takeaways that perhaps isn't as obvious, is we've always dealt with startups and enterprise. It's a kind of weird dichotomy, but that's always been what Dutrix has been about. And you get the enthusiasm and the craziness and the cutting edge stuff from the startups, and then you get the bread and butter and complex stuff from the enterprise. And on these kind of larger non-startup gigs, that you need to do an awful lot of governance and due diligence and analysis and design up front. And the way Dutrix has approached that is we were sort of pinned to the disciplined agile delivery framework of a way of doing things. And we would start one of these projects with an inception. And you get lots of developers and architects, and they go away and they talk to those people and they figure stuff out and they come up with stuff and they try and pull it apart and they come up with new stuff. And at the end of the process, you have a whacking great big document that kind of proves you've done all the stuff, right? You've talked to all the people, you've thought about all the stuff, you've got your design, you're ready to go into the next stage. And we call that process an inception. Now, we can't call what we did with you guys an inception. That would not be fair. But from one day of intense workshops, the level of documentation that we got out of it was also outstanding. And you could argue that there is a kind of a mini inception that we were able to do in just that one day, because what we were able to do, because of all the workshops were recorded and transcribed, and because of all the stuff you bought, so you bought documents, you bought your pitch deck, you bought competitor stuff, so all those documents we had as well that we were able to feed in to the AI tooling, and with various prompts and techniques and the feedback loop, which kept circling in the new information that we were uncovering and producing during that day. We ended up with a wealth of information and documentation, which we were then able to run kind of deep research over and pull out, requirements and non-functional requirements and mermaid diagrams and architecture diagrams and API blueprints, all this kind of stuff. And because you're able to generate that document so quickly, you end up with this artifact at the end of it, which is not on the same level as something we would have done through a 6 to 8 week inception, but we did it in a day.
Yeah.
And it was, you've seen it. It's a tomb, right? It's quite a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't recommend sitting down to read it, without having a purpose.
Oh, don't pretend you've read it, Eric. No, I think it's just one of those things, isn't it? It's that's one of the surprising things for me, to be able to do that kind of level of mini inception in such a short amount of time.
Yes.
To go from to go from your head to design, and then from design to code almost instantly.
Yes.
And then be able to develop software that has more features than you even thought you could have done in the small amount of time available, with an AI agent essentially that allows you to query that data and pull out all these stuffs and put graphs on screen and do complex calculations on aerodynamics and fuel
Yes.
usage and number of hops and all that kind of stuff in 5 days. Yeah, it's a real eye opener to us, and something that we're kind of well, it's made us look at stuff differently now, and looking forward to developing it.
Yeah, it really was amazing outcome. Really was.
So for businesses then who are just kind of thinking about AI and integrating this stuff into the operations, whether it's working on new ideas or just streamlining stuff, have you got any advice, kind of how to get started? Different people are approaching it with different pace, but
Yeah,
you've seen something of kind of what's possible, both in terms of the development of an idea, but also in terms of obviously what's possible within your product.
yeah.
How should people get started? How do you approach this?
I think where Matt and I are going with it is that AI built within our SaaS, having AI in there, is so that it can do the thinking for the end user. It can do the analysis of all that data for the end user. It can make suggestions based on all of that information for the end user. And ultimately, the more the end user uses it, the better decisions it will make. The AI will start to learn, what does my end user need from this system, and will build up a wealth of knowledge, and it starts to make the decisions that you would make if you had the time and the inclination to go data mining and analyzing and calculating. A day later, you come up with this action plan that you're going to take. Well, our AI tool will do that for you in 5 minutes or less, depending on how many questions you're asking Fynlo this, and then based on the answer, you ask a couple more questions, and maybe after a 5-minute exchange with Fynlo, you've got the results that might have taken you a day. So for us, for Matt and I, we thought AI would be a really essential tool in this, and because we are adding something, a fleet manager already has tasks and responsibilities. It is not a quiet job at all. It's a very busy, brain active role. And this is where more demands come on them, especially if a company has net zero goals, or indeed they're going for contracts where they have to provide evidence that backs up their carbon footprint. When you take on this project, when you get this contract, we need to know what is your carbon footprint contribution to this project, and that's a tough question to answer. Sometimes they need it for funding applications as well also, so accurate calculations help. So those questions normally then get passed on to the fleet manager, and the AI tool, as it continues to work with the end user, is eventually going to be able to, it pretty quickly actually is going to speed up that role.
A really important observation, I think, actually, because one of the jobs that they think that the commenters at large think that AI, will replace essentially, is that of the data analyst. And if you think about the role of a data analyst at the moment, they are poring over that data. They're trying to understand patterns. They're running various tests against it. They're pulling out suggestions. They're translating that data into something that gives the business insights. And then they're translating those insights into actionable things that they can do to improve X, Y, or Z. And that's pretty much exactly what you've just described there. You want to build a software system that's understanding this data, looking at it, analyzing it, and making some kind of, understanding the patterns and making some kind of recommendations off the back of it. And those recommendations will be aligned to how you reduce your carbon footprint. So whether that's, inflate tires before you regularly, or go via that route, go via this route, or actually, did you know you've got this many trucks doing this kind of thing, but if you split the load up and did it this way, it would be a different result. Those are the kind of pattern analysis and data insight tasks that essentially, you want to enable your software to do,
Right.
rather than some fleet manager or whoever that has to kind of figure all this stuff out for themselves.
Yeah, exactly right. And just to pick out one of those details that you dropped in there, Kevin, about tire pressures, it's really interesting that a fleet manager might have 4 or 5 different brands on their fleet because of the different size of vehicles or the different time at which they purchased that vehicle compared with the others. And so there may well be different tire pressure requirements. So how will normally a fleet manager know the correct tire pressures to recommend to the driver and so on? And they would maybe spend 5 or 10 minutes maybe going through the booklet that comes with the car or some kind of online information. But the AI will find that quicker, right? It already knows from our program, it knows what is this vehicle. And therefore it's able to search and bring up, here is a recommended tire pressure. And that's something that could really speed up the actions. As it gives a suggestion like, to be more energy efficient, we recommend making sure the tire pressures are at their optimum all the time. And the next question from the fleet manager might be, right, what's the optimum tire pressure? I need to go and find that now and provide my drivers with that information. Well, Fynlo will do that.
And how much would that one change contribute to my carbon offset?
Yeah, precisely. It's quite a variable, but we know that tire drag, when a tire is low, tire drag is a huge impact on energy efficiency. So that's a factor that's calculated into our emissions. So yeah, it could be just as a variable example, but it could be quite a lot. But I know that typically, if you're supposed to be running at 2.5 bar of pressure, then having a tire down at about 1 bar could be affecting you by a good 10% or so in the actual output. So the drag has a big impact on energy efficiency.
Fynlo would be able to as well to spot that change over time, right? So it doesn't fall off a cliff often unless there's a catastrophic change. I mean, but it will drop to 2.2, 2.1, 2, and the data will show that because it will show it's becoming less efficient.
Yeah,
it's able to then flag it and say, look, you probably need to check your tires, guys.
Yeah,
before it becomes maybe a problem, which is more would have been more.
Put some more air in before you leave because it's cold, right? So,
yeah.
Right.
That's it. That's it. It has a knock-on effect, and some of the people watching this will notice already. But low tire pressures, you'll end up wearing out that tire much quicker. You'll end up potentially, certainly increasing your fuel consumption, and that will have a direct effect on the emissions as well. And so there's a couple of knock-on effects which are cost-related as well, not just a carbon footprint impactful, but daily running costs are affected by those kind of basic maintenances as well.
So do you see the ultimate ambition of Fynlo AI as a digital fleet manager, if you like, or a co-pilot for a fleet manager, or where does it fit in the ecosystem of logistics?
It's a very good question. It does not, in our vision, replace any person at all. Supports, like, I think co-pilot is a great phrase for it, as the demands on the person, the decision maker, the responsible manager in that team. The demands on that person are growing all the time in a variety of different ways, not only to do with reporting on carbon emissions and reducing the emissions of the fleet and switching over to electric eventually, and so on and so on. Those demands are weighing heavy, but the demands on general efficiency is getting tougher. The demands on the driver team are getting tougher as well. So this person is a very vital role in any business that has a fleet of vehicles, and they need a co-pilot to support some of the more data-oriented areas of their day. That frees them up to maybe be a bit more interpersonal and looking after the drivers on an interpersonal level, rather than saying, I haven't got time for that because I need to be in the office crunching numbers, just to, put it bluntly.
I'm really interested to know now that as you're a tech founder and a new entrepreneur in this space, and you've got some early success, you've got over some of those early hurdles. Have you got any advice for wannabe tech founders before they kick off their brand new business?
Yeah, a couple of things that came to mind, and that is, first of all, within your approach, within your outlook for whatever it is you're building or working on to put out there to customers, especially if it hasn't been done before and seems to be a new idea for an existing, well-established industry, I would say for sure, have that optimism and have that determination. If you're convinced, then keep going. Be sure in yourself first of all, and you will get many potential customers and investors who will say, I don't see it, I don't get it. And that's all right. Not everybody sees and gets everything straight away, and it will take time to sink in. So be determined, be optimistic. When you have a meeting with an investor or a potential customer, and out of that meeting comes more questions than answers, say, well, that's all right. That's okay. That potential customer or investor is not closed yet. It's not over yet. And when I say closed, I mean sort of disregarded as an investor or a customer. It's not like that. All you've had is your first stage of discussions and an understanding. And now you know better what's on their mind. You now understand better, well, there were some questions I couldn't answer there. There was some information I couldn't provide, or a point of view that I've not heard before about this kind of thing. So I've got to go away and add that to my repertoire. I've got to add that to my pitch so that I can go back to them for round two. I can say, hey, you know what? New things have come up. We've discovered more. We understand better. I'd like a second discussion if you got the time. And you can address those things. So be optimistic, be determined. When it's a no, it's not a permanent no. It's a no because there's something maybe missing, and go back and find it and then have another go round. And it does work. We're not there yet. 6 months in or so, a year since company inception, but 6 months since our first funding and our first sort of beginning of creating the software. If we say that. So 6 months in, we don't have customer money coming in yet. And that's all right. That is normal. It could be another 6 months. I hope not, but it could be another 6 months till customer money comes in. And I still believe that we have something worth paying for, something that is a solution that will be gratefully received by paying customers. So yeah, I think optimism, really important, determination, and don't be put off by those no conversations, because it's just the first stage, What else would I say? I think also on the topic of funding as a startup, Matt and I are in the situation with Fynlo AI where we do need external funding investments. And so what I think is really important is having a very clear vision of where you're going with it. Try and paint that picture for a potential investor of what this is, what is the problem you're trying to solve. Speak to as many potential customers as possible on that respect, and be able to relay to your potential investors what they say, just as much as what you think is the problem and what you think is the solution and why you think this is really important. That counts. But if you can also relay what the customer target audience is also saying and needing and wanting and looking for and is willing to pay for it, then being able to describe that, paint a picture of that, is really valuable to a potential investor, especially when you're in those early stages. You're asking a lot of investors, I think, to put up some money into something that is not in the hands of customers yet. And so I think you have to give as much as possible for them to be able to say, here's my money. I want a piece of that action.
Yeah, makes sense. That's some great advice there. One question we like to ask everyone that joins us as a guest before they leave us is, what's the next thing that we should be talking about right now, but we're not?
If I think about specifically what we are doing, the term accuracy, Matt and I have put so much emphasis on this, and we're really convinced that accuracy is a very important part of any kind of data analysis reporting. And if you're going to use data analysis to form an action plan that is going to have a positive effect on what your business is doing, I think accuracy is really important. And so being more accurate is what we're offering our customers, or being totally accurate actually is what we're offering our customers. And where we have made certain that that is in our pitch and in our discussions with everybody, we're now starting to hear it come back around in what we are hearing in presentations and general chatter in the industry around net zero. Accurate reporting, I think, is going to be a really big topic. At the moment, it is gaining momentum. And Matt and I'm certain we've contributed towards that gaining momentum around the discussion of accuracy. I believe AI as a well-utilized, well-built tool, I believe AI can really contribute towards that accuracy. And I don't hear it being spoken about enough yet. So I believe that could be a place, a direction that we could be going in, is the accuracy and the certainty of your actions could be based on an AI sourced information or action plan.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Owen. It's been great talking to you. I really love what you guys are doing. It's been
Thanks, Rob.
fantastic to be part of that journey in our
Appreciate that.
small way. And thank you so much for letting us experiment on you as well a few months ago with the AI design sprint. Brilliant. If people want to learn more about Fynlo AI, where can they learn more about you? Where can they connect with you?
Right, Matt did a great thing, and he secured the website really early. So we've got a nice, simple website. Go to www.fynlo.ai. Simple as that. You'll learn a lot about us on the website there, or check me out on LinkedIn as well. Just look for Owen Balk on LinkedIn and you'll find me there. Everything that we put on LinkedIn, I'm tagging Matt, my co-founder, in as well. So if you look up Matt Leak on LinkedIn, and then you'll find a lot of updates from us, and then visit the website. We'll give you a broad story of what we've been doing and where we're going.